Welcome to episode 8 of Mad Time Podcast in our new and improved studio. Our producer over there, Max Myers, painted it up, make it look all pretty. We're minus Zach Campbell today, but it's just me, Brock, and Brad. This is our year-end podcast. We're going to cover the knockouts and submissions, the fights and the fighters of the year in 2019. It was a pretty good year. We definitely look at the knock. It did take me a while with female knockouts and submissions, I'll be completely honest, but I did a lot of research. It wasn't as exciting as my male candidates, but we are going to start with the female, and I'm going to start with the knockout. My personal pick for knockout of the year, I think this is undoubtedly Valentina Shevchenko. I give her the knockout of the year over Jessica Ai with her head kick. It's not too often you see in female fights that a female just gets knocked completely out. I think we both can agree. We all can agree that we don't see that too much.
Right, and, flat to their back.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare, especially with a high kick.
We were getting the reputation with Valentina Shevchenko that she was going to be like a boring fighter. And,
like a 5-round fighter.
Yeah, and like the over-unders in her fights were like 4.5, and like would she ever finish anybody? And that happens. So... What did you guys think? I mean, do you think that's a good pick? What do you guys think?
I think it's a great pick. I don't want to say I was surprised that she was able to pull off that knockout because she is very high level, but I definitely wasn't sure, like you were saying, if she was going to be that knockout exciting fighter. I thought she was going to be the dominant 5-round fighter who wouldn't necessarily put somebody away, but would hurt them for an entire 5-round fight and catch a win most of the time. Mm-hmm. Brad, how do you feel about that?
About the Shevchenko knockout, I was incredibly impressed with because of not just because that it was impressive to see her get a finish and a really good finish over an underrated opponent in Jessica Ai. I mean, she punched that bitch's ear right off.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree Jessica Ai was maybe counted out of that fight, and I don't disagree with people that said they thought that she was going to lose in bad fashion as well. But I did say, I believe on the last podcast, I said she has like a dog fight in her that, those wrestlers have, that wrestler mentality coming from Ohio and everything. I thought she might have been able to grind something out, but, people get caught with head kicks, especially when you're going against very high level striking opponents. That's just a thing that happens.
Yeah, I think Valentina had a phenomenal year. I know her following fight with Liz Cumrush wasn't very impressive. It was very uneventful, one of the most uneventful fights of the year. But I've always respected Valentina as one of the pound-for-pound greats of the sport. And I'd even love to see a rematch with Amanda Nunes. I don't know if we'd ever see that on the horizon because
Amanda Nunes is running out of fights.
Yeah.
She is,
so that's got to come back one way or another.
You don't often see trilogies after a fighter's won twice.
Right. But kind of the John Jones DC situation. It's like, well, do we really want to see it?
And like you didn't see it with Mighty Mouse and Joseph Benavidez.
Yep. Brock, do you have your female KO of the year?
Yeah. So personally, although I think that's a great pick, just to be different and offset it, maybe I'll say I thought my female knockout of the year, just because of how surprising it was and the entertainment factor, I'm going to go with Jessica Andrade's KO of Rose Namajunas. Rose was going for the Kimura position as Andrade had a single leg, I think an inside single. And she basically, just scooped her up. Rose held on to the Kimura, and she just spiked her on her head, really. I think that I picked that one just because of how crazy that is. I feel like that's not a thing you ever really see.
Yeah, you don't see slam KOs very often,
right, especially
the
power that Andrade was able to showcase, how strong her core and her back and everything is for her to be able to do that. It's tough doing that, especially if someone's going for a Kimura. Yes, she still did have her hands locked, so she still had a tough grip on it, but it just shows maybe there was a little bit of a hole in Namajunas' game. I don't want to say. I think she's very legit. I like her.
I think
it
was her mental game,
but I think it was just a mistake, and it happens. And it was there was a big, there's a risk reward there, and she risked a lot. She didn't think she was risking a lot, right? That's a low risk thing normally, normally that's a low risk move, but it cost her a lot in the end.
Let me ask you something, just because I saw a lot of this was most of the talk after that fight happened, was people criticizing the fact that she was allowed to do that. She was allowed to slam her on top of her head, and it was dangerous. And, I think there's a constant debate because people want to see a pure fight, and then some people just want to see a clean sport. Did you think anything was dirty about what happened? Do you think the rules should be changed to not have stuff like that happen?
There is a rule against spiking and pile driving.
Right.
That is not.
But that's more so directly on the top of her head.
That rule is against compressing the spine directly down.
Yeah, especially on like a sprawl position. Yeah.
The side of her
head.
That
was more so on like the neck and the side of the head.
Now slams aren't. You don't do slams in a lot of grappling competitions, but in wrestling competitions, slams are a big deal, right?
Right.
So it's just
here's the thing as well. How many times do we see a guy throw somebody and knock themselves out?
Yeah.
It's just a thing that happens. And I don't know if, obviously Andrade doesn't know, like, well, if I try to throw her down on the ground, that I'm going to knock her out. You don't know that. That's just her way of trying to get that Kimura off and get that takedown. Mm-hmm. But, she slams her down. Oh, well, she's not moving.
Really,
Let me land a couple punches and end this fight.
When it comes to me defending, because I don't think there's anything wrong with what Andrade did. My defense is it's a fight, and she was fighting to get out of a submission. You know what I mean?
So I would see Brock's Jessica Andrade knockout, and I will raise him Zhang Weili's knockout of Jessica Andrade. Now, Zhang Weili is incredibly impressive in her stand-up and has great power in her hands. And not just for the women's division, but for the UFC in general, she's a big deal because she is the very first Chinese champion. That's a huge market. That's a huge area to open up to more fighters and more talent to come into the sport now. And it's really a huge deal. And it's kind of, we'll talk about her again later.
The excitement with both of those knockouts was both of them happened in front of the winner's home country. Andrade got it in Brazil, and then Weili Zhang got it in China. That's kind of what added to that moment was, especially in China, because Asian countries, they don't really get loud, especially more so Japan is quiet, but like all the Asian countries are very quiet, very polite, but that arena erupted when Weili Zhang
won. It's just surprising, right? You'd have to consider that one of the best knockouts of the year strictly for how dominant she looked, right? I mean, she came out with such power. It almost reminded you of Cyborg, a younger Cyborg, where she was just tearing through people up until she came against Nunes.
Was Chuck Liddell people.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I think I'm really looking forward to that division this coming year because I believe Joanna Jędrzejczyk is getting the title shot against Weili Zhang.
She's on the rise back up, right?
Yeah. I don't know what to think of that fight, and that's what makes it so exciting.
I thought size-wise, I think Zhang's bigger.
Yeah,
I think so, yeah.
And that's what surprised me about Zhang to begin with, that she was bigger than these girls. And she can come in and still dominate at this small division.
She wins in very impressive fashion, too. That's what really caught me off guard.
In the UFC.
It was very surprising, and maybe I haven't seen enough of her to think, oh well, maybe that's just her. I just maybe I'm just ignorant.
She's so new. Like she's obviously showed her skill, but we'll see how she does with the title, and it's always different when you're the hunted and not the hunter.
Yep.
But we're gonna move on to submission after giving all of our knockouts. I'll be completely honest. I mean, I saw a lot of the same submissions when it came to females. I saw a million arm bars this year. It was hard to really see if there was anything superior about any of the arm bars I saw. But one that really stuck out to me was Megan Anderson getting a triangle choke against Zara Dos Santos earlier this year. Mm-hmm. The reason I picked this, number one, because you don't see triangle chokes too often anymore. As common as it is in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, as common as it was when...
At least in Nick's game.
as common as it was in mixed martial arts in its early stages, you don't see triangles too often anymore. And it was cool to see that, especially with Megan Anderson coming off of a submission loss against a person she was probably supposed to beat in Felicia Spencer. Mm-hmm. So there was constant criticism of her submission game. and people thought that was the extreme weak point of her game, and she came out and hit a beautiful triangle in transition. It was one of those, I think, really she was going for a takedown, but maybe the other girl got her down, and in the transition, she has very long legs and was able to lock up the triangle choke.
Brock, it was a really beautiful transition.
Yeah.
It was.
Brock, what did you think?
I picked the armbar that Paige Van Zandt hit on Rachel Ostovich.
In the battle of the dime pieces?
No comment. Basically, I picked this one just because I thought it was just a pretty cool like transition they had with a lot of the grappling on the ground. It was very back and forth. Paige gets the back. She's a little high, I believe. Rachel starts fighting. I think she posts, gets her butt up, kind of shrugging off Paige. Paige starts sliding off because her hips are high, but is able to kind of pull an armbar out of it. Yeah. Winds up finishing the armbar. I just liked it a lot because I enjoy seeing those last ditch effort submissions and knockouts and things like that. I always like seeing those come through because it shows that, you know, if you're like, it just shows like a certain either I guess fighter's awareness, or it just shows like a certain level of heart that fighter has or determination they have. I thought it was very cool. She still kept fighting, because a lot of people, when they feel like they're in that compromised position, they're thinking, well, damn, I'm this far up on the hips, I'm getting shucked off, I might as well try to stand up. And she knew she maybe had the skill, or, you know, I guess she maybe thought she had the skill or had her tired enough or whatever the case may be to pull off that armbar. I thought it was very cool that she got that, because I feel like we don't necessarily see that a lot. Kind of like same with the Megan Anderson triangle. It's just kind of it was kind of out of the blue, and it surprised me, so I liked it a lot.
And I'm co-signing on Brock's submission because that's obviously something that Paige has had to deal with, because where she's training and with the people she's training with, she's obviously, if she's on anybody's back, they're going to post and just shuck her off. So this is obviously something she's worked on to counter this exact type of defense to her back control.
Right. I mean, I would say most of her career, she's been around really strong wrestlers. I feel like real strong wrestlers.
A whole lot of strong wrestlers,
especially because she spent quite a bit of time with Team Alpha Male before leaving, and
she's at ATT now, right?
Right. I'm not sure. To be honest.
She's done a lot of gym hopping in the past couple of years. I don't know where she is currently, but
yeah. But at least in her run with Team Alpha Male, you know, every guy in there is a solid wrestler, at least at a D2 level. I would probably say. It's just full of people her height and weight, like a bunch of dudes. I don't know if there's a lot of chicks that train there, but when you have such high level wrestling around you, it puts you in these different exchanges that you might not see all the time if you're at just a jiu-jitsu school, just a wrestling guy, like a wrestling place with wrestling guys. I think it's a cool thing, because that's a lot of things wrestlers are going to do. A lot of jiu-jitsu guys might try to get to their back to the mat and keep fighting. But, you know, you'll see a lot of the wrestlers, they try to post and shuck the shoulders and hope they get the hips up.
You would certainly have to think, and this makes me think of a really good point, that when you're especially a lower weight woman fighting in MMA, it has to be hard to find training partners, because
for sure,
yeah, I mean, it's still a new sport to women. It's a young sport in general, but
it's hard to find
the level.
Right, you might find them at your weight and size, your height and size and everything, but it's going to be hard for you to find the skill level.
Yeah,
I feel like, because not because they're not as good. Women can be just as good at, their technique and everything's going to be just as good if they have the same amount of time in and everything. It's just there's not the same population of women as there are men. It's going to be a lot harder for her to find the high levels. So that's what put her in a place like Team Alpha Male, I feel like.
So do you want to move to your female fighter of the year, Nick?
I'll actually start with the fight of the year.
Okay.
I'm really glad I've got to give this chick a shout out, because she's one of my favorite female fighters. Aspen Ladd versus Sajara Eubanks. It was on a really good card, a fight night earlier this year. So I watched this fight back. Aspen Ladd, obviously a phenomenal grappler. I would really hope that she finds her way to a title shot in the next couple of years. I know she's hit a couple roadblocks, but I watched this fight with Sajara Eubanks, who's somebody who was knocking on the door of a title shot as well. Very back and forth the entire fight, and I think both chicks gave it their all, and you really see a little bit of everything in this fight. You see both these chicks going toe-to-toe late in the third round with the striking. Aspen Ladd using her bread and butter early in the fight with her takedowns and her ground and pound, and she had a couple really close submissions. But what made it more impressive and what made it fight of the night and fight of the year material was how game Sijara Eubanks was fighting out of submissions, and she even engaged the first takedown attempt in the fight with a blast double leg, and it really set the tone for a really competitive fight. And she proved that Aspen Ladd had a tough order ahead of her, but indeed she did overcome it, and she won the unanimous decision. But I believe they did win fight of the night that night, and that is my candidate, because I definitely like a back and forth fight that displays skill in every area and for both.
Yeah, and now my female fight of the year would be Amanda Nunes and Jermaine Durandamy.
Okay.
I think getting to see how Jermaine pushed Amanda and at times even outstruck Amanda and forced Amanda into her wrestling and jiu-jitsu game a little bit. Amanda looked like she came out and could have maybe even finished her in the first round, but Jermaine stayed strong and won a couple rounds, I would even say, in what was a really good fight.
Yeah.
And a different kind of fight than you see from Amanda Nunes. Usually you see her barnstorming somebody and just burn somebody down in 35 seconds.
So let me ask you something, because I think you see this criticism of every champion, because they're put in a limelight and their performances are put under a microscope where the fans expect something from them. Maybe they're not trying.
Well, they have to be bulletproof, right? You're not allowed to have any holes in your game.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to have any sort of imperfection, or else you're a bum now.
But the spin out, the approach I was going to take there is, I feel like a lot of fans, they almost put like some kind of entertainment quota on champions, where it's the debate between sport and entertainment,
right?
Yeah.
And do you think Amanda Nunes has any obligation to put on entertaining performances, or do you think, because she put on
I understand what you're saying,
yeah.
And I for one was entertained by the whole fight.
Yeah.
I mean, I see where the first round and the way that was going for Amanda, and if the entire fight had gone that way, I mean, that would be more entertaining for a more massive wide audience.
Yeah.
But I think the idea is to win your fight and take as little damage as possible.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
And it can't be understated how good Amanda Nunes is. She has literally defeated everyone to hold the belt in both divisions ever. To hold the belt in both of the divisions she competes in.
Yeah, so I think it just becomes a thing where, like I said, I think fans kind of just make this assumption that they're owed something by champions and top-level fighters to put on entertaining performances, and they don't remember what it all comes down to, and it's wins and losses. And I think we need to erase the stigma of, sometimes fights are boring. Sometimes it just happens. Even when, like, I agree with you. There were some parts of that fight that were very entertaining to me. But at the same time, even if it wasn't, oh well, you move on, because it's their job to win a fight, and that is what it comes down to. They're not getting paid to be entertaining, even though they might have some kind of indirect payoff to be entertaining, sponsors and stuff like that.
To me,
bonuses,
any
get paid
fight
to win.
The first time you watch any fight, it's entertaining. It's the suspense of trying to see what's going to happen. Now, we've seen so many fights that we can see when, these two guys are just going to like coast to the end and it's going to be a lackluster fight. And
it's more like a sparring match than a fight.
When guys aren't in there with the kind of cardio to finish this whole fight, to go all the way, that's when I would put something on the fighter. If you don't have enough to get through your fight, that's one thing. But to say you need to fight in this way with this style so that I like what you do, that's completely ridiculous.
I think really, like, my thing is, I can understand criticism if you notice that a fighter's way better than their opponent and they're just not doing anything about it. But in that fight in specific, Jermaine Durandamy had Amanda Nunes in a little bit of trouble. And
for
sure. And she fought through
Amanda Nunes had to pull in her bag of tricks, and that was her takedowns, and that was her top control. And she had to realize, like, this is how I'm going to win this fight. If I do anything else, I could lose my title.
And she, like, treated Jermaine Durandamy like a white belt on the ground at times. It was impressive.
That's the thing that happens a lot with not taking anything away from Jermaine's jiu-jitsu or wrestling or grappling game as a whole, but when you're such a high-level striker, you're not going to be the best at the grappling because you haven't been doing it as long, or maybe there are holes in that game because it's not a thing. Like that's not your thing, right?
Right.
Like, a lot of jiu-jitsu guys can't throw hands, but at the second they drag you to the ground, you're done for, right? Damian Maia doesn't necessarily have the best boxing in the world, but he has enough to negate whatever that guy's going to do. For the most part, there's select few fights where it didn't work out, but for the most part, he's going to be able to strike enough to hold his own until he can get the guy to the ground. But like you guys were saying, I'm a big advocate for win the fight first, entertainment second.
Yes.
That's got to be how you treat this sport.
Yeah. It doesn't matter to me if it's a boring fight. Like, yeah, maybe I'll be like, that fight wasn't what I wanted it to be. Maybe I'll say it's boring. I'll say it wasn't the fight I wanted it to be, but they still won, and I still have a lot of respect for that person for winning a fight. Because at the end of the day, all that matters is if you still hold the belt or not, if you're the one holding the belt.
And it's long been proven that you can be entertaining enough outside of the ring, outside of the octagon, outside of your fight, to bring people in to watch you fight.
Sure.
Definitely.
The Chael Sonnen, Chael Sonnen's son, everybody. Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather, Muhammad Ali. I mean, Floyd's
if you could sell the fight, that's all that matters.
That's all that matters.
Brock, what was your 2019 female fight of the year?
Female fight?
Yes.
I would probably agree with you with the Aspen Ladd fight.
It's a good ass fight.
I'm a big fan of her as well. She had the loss against Jermaine Durandamy. Let me see, when was that?
I think it was earlier this year.
That was in
wasn't
July.
it?
Yeah.
Yes.
That was in July, so it kind of sucked because she was on a really good win streak there.
And if she would have won that, obviously she would have been against Amanda Nunes and not Jermaine Durandamy.
Right. Which, I'm not saying that Jermaine didn't win that fight because she put her on her ass and hurt her with that hook. I believe it was a hook. She hurt her, but I do think it was stopped early. But I'm not going to be the person that says, she had a chance to get back up or this, that, and the other. I'll just leave it at I think it was stopped a little bit early.
Yeah,
not saying that she was still in the fight. Just saying it was a little bit early.
That was my gripe with, remember TJ Dillashaw when against Henry Cejudo. Everybody remembers that.
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, obviously I have a gripe about the stoppage, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to say, he didn't beat him. He did beat him.
He had him hurt, and, it is what it is. It's the fight game. It happens. But it was good to see her come back and get that round 3 decision, round 3 TKO. I don't know how to pronounce this chick's name, so I'm not even going to attempt. It was in early December. Yana Kunitskaya.
Yeah. That's when we met Dustin Poirier.
Right. Yeah. So that was a really good fight. I'm happy to see her kind of break that one loss and get back to where we know she can be. I still think she's a very high level fighter with a lot to prove, and I believe she's still fairly young. She's a very young fighter. So I'm very excited to see where the career goes from here because she's still climbing her way to the top.
So capping off the female section of our podcast today, the female fighter of the year, I think there are a couple worthy candidates, but I feel like most of us agree. I'm going to give female fighter of the year of 2019 to the UFC strawweight champion Weili Zhang, after going on an impressive tear and then knocking out the then champion Jessica Andrade,
who was on a tear of her own. Who had just rocked out Rose, who was on a tear of her own.
Yes.
It's so impressive.
What made it so impressive is that if you watch that fight with no context and not knowing who Jessica Andrade is, you would think that she was a bum because that's how Weili Zhang made her look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it made her look amateur,
absolutely baffling because I knew that Weili Zhang had a chance. I think a lot of people thought she had a chance, but I thought it was going to be a hard-fought fight, and I thought Jessica Andrade was going to take it, but I was quickly proven wrong.
Yeah. That may be. I don't know about you. Is that your pick too, Brock? Because that would be my pick.
I think I would pick her. I was kind of torn between her and Amanda Nunes.
It's hard to deny Amanda Nunes.
You kind of have to say. I kind of agree with you guys, right? I mean, I was very ignorant going into that card. I didn't know much about her.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily. I don't want to say I didn't care to look into it, but I just didn't for whatever reason. I just didn't necessarily look into it. I figured
there wasn't a ton of hype behind her yet.
Correct.
It was kind of just like a dark horse situation.
Definitely. Well, I figured if she's fighting for the title, she's got to be legit. I didn't know. I didn't have a huge background on her as a fighter.
We've seen a couple times when it comes to people getting title shots, maybe they weren't like the next person up. Like there was a person more deserving, but
right, or more popular.
How injuries pan out sometimes, and like we saw earlier this year, Alexander Volkanovski should have gotten the title shot instead of Frankie Edgar, but he was injured, and Frankie was ready to go. Right. Does Frankie deserve a title shot at that point? Probably not, but is he the only one ready? That's what mattered. So
it comes down to business at the end of the day.
Did Weili Zhang have the body of work to have a title shot at that point in time? Maybe not, but did she do everything she possibly could with that opportunity? I think she did.
Definitely. I mean, she won in, I would say, pretty dominant fashion. Yeah. She made, I don't want to say she made it look easy. It's still a fight. There's nothing easy about a fight, but she looked like
she didn't Dillashaw Barrow.
She looked like a veteran. She looked very good. I was extremely impressed.
That was another example of what I'm talking about, Brad, where Dillashaw wasn't really supposed to get that title shot. I think Rafael Assunção was, and
it's just how it worked out.
Rise to the occasion.
Do you know? Just fun fact for you: what the Dillashaw Barrow fight and the Zhang Andrade fight have in common?
Brazilian champions getting their ass beat.
No. I picked them right before they happened.
Oh, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
You picked Zhang in that fight?
I was picking Zhang because I had to look into it and go and see what she did, and just compared to Andrade, and also taking into account that Andrade is coming from Brazil to China. Mm-hmm. I liked Zhang in that fight, yes.
So yeah, obviously when it comes to picking any of these, especially fighter, I think fighter is the most subjective thing to pick because you have a champion.
It's more so a popularity contest, to be honest. It comes down to guys that you like.
I think
or girls
the
that you
hype
like.
comes around when a champion just won their belt that year, because Amanda Nunes has already been champion. She won both
She's
her belts
extremely
last
dominant,
year.
though. You can't deny that.
There's no way to deny Amanda
Nunes. I wouldn't argue if you guys picked Amanda Nunes.
Maybe overall pound for pound, because she has more of a
resume.
Right, she has more of a resume there. But Weili Zhang, it was so impressive, and it was just, it was so new, something we haven't seen before.
That's what my criteria was.
Story.
Obviously, we all have our own criteria, but my criteria for fighter was the uprising.
Because it happened in this calendar year, and it wasn't a continuation of the dominance. That's why Weili Zhang.
Right, that's why I feel it's so impressive.
Impressed me and got the. That Weili Zhang is our female fighter for 2019.
Right.
So we move on to the males, and we're going to start with the knockout of 2019. I don't think there's going to be much argument on this, but I got to introduce this in a very dramatic way because I think this is probably one of the greatest knockouts in the history of the UFC. It might be like top 2, top 3 of all time.
The fastest knockout.
The fastest knockout in UFC history over
Bang Ludwig.
An undefeated 2-time world champion, Jorge Masvidal's 4-second.
3 if you
if you're going technically, then yes, 3 seconds. But if you're going off of records, 4 seconds over the 2-time world champion Ben Askren.
Hugely impressive. Who could have seen something like that coming?
Maybe Brad McCoy, when he predicted in our podcast that Masvidal was going to spark him, and none of us believed him.
So on paper, everyone was right. If that fight keeps going, if Askren probably could have just dominated him wrestling, but sometimes you see it, and Masvidal has that little bit of destiny about him, and it was coming right then where he was.
It was his time,
man. What Zach has called the magic. I think it has a lot to do with momentum.
Yes,
definitely.
I think you can be a higher level than you truly are. Not to knock.
It's a mentality thing, really. I feel like
when you have the mental magic, it's like you can do anything.
Oh yeah, that's why I feel like being mentally prepared for something is harder than being physically prepared for something. Not many people necessarily. It's hard to, train for that. But sometimes, like Tyron Woodley against Usman, do I think Usman would have won that fight anyways? Yes. Do I think that was the best Tyron Woodley that could have been in that fight? No. I feel like he, I don't know what was going on, but I feel like he had a lot of outside distractions. Physically, he looked in great shape. Mm-hmm. I don't think he could have been any better in that form.
He didn't have the magic that night.
Right. Mentally, it's just he wasn't there, and it happens to the best guys.
It can happen any night.
Yeah.
Demetrius Johnson's talked about that.
George St. Pierre's talked about it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to get off the topic a little bit just because we were talking about Ben Askren, who was on the receiving end of this knockout, and we speculate what would have happened if the fight went, a couple minutes, a couple rounds. Seeing what we've seen out of Ben Askren in that, and obviously what happened in that fight and the following fight with Damian Maia, we've seen what his striking looks like. We obviously know what he brings to the table as far as offensive wrestling. We saw he had a hard time with Robbie Lawler. We could say that he had a successful fight if he was able to grind out a long 15-minute fight with Jorge Masvidal, but I almost feel like my mind's been changed with seeing what I've seen, that maybe he was in for a rough night regardless.
Yeah, no,
I agree.
We've seen Askren in Bellator. We saw him in one, and he was always dominant. Yeah. And
there was one judo guy,
completely legit, but he beat him again when they came back.
Right. I think he won both fights technically.
The one was like,
but he definitely had a
situation.
Was it Luis Santos? I think it was Sapo Santos.
Maybe.
Is that what his name was?
Santos sounds right. Yeah. And there was an eye poke in the first fight.
But until then, he just kind of looked bulletproof, right? There wasn't necessarily any sort of guy that you didn't have any concern watching Ben go into a fight.
Right.
And then he comes into the UFC and he's got a lot of doubters, and then he has a hype train with him as well. And then you got the guys like talking about how he's a god, he's going to be the next champ. And then you had guys who maybe you would even call more realistic or a little more grounded. He's going into the UFC, he's fighting a savage in Robbie Lawler. Some argue that fight could have been stopped, right? Because he was getting his head beat into the mat.
Yeah. But I always have a problem with like we say the fight should have been stopped, but the guy came back on his own power, no interference, and then choked the guy out.
And that's why I don't have a problem with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ben Askren has had his run and everything, and when he got to the highest level, he was weighed, he was measured, and he was found wanting. And not to take away anything he did, and maybe 5 years ago, it would have been a little bit different in his prime.
Yeah.
But I don't see
taking 2 years off. It probably hurt a little bit.
I don't see a time where Ben Askren ever had the skill set to beat a Tyron Woodley. He was never going to beat Tyron. I don't think he ever could have beat Usman. He was never going to beat Colby.
Nope. He never had his striking together.
He never had his striking together to come against anyone that had wrestling that approached his.
He had absolutely no plan B.
Well, that's kind of the Brock Lesnar thing, right? I would even argue maybe Ben can take more of a punch than Brock Lesnar, because like Brock Lesnar, and I'm not saying like he has a better chin. I'm just saying Brock Lesnar does not like getting punched in general. But that was kind of both of their things, right? It's like, well, I'm going to wrestle you, and if that doesn't work, then I'm fucked. And that Brock could throw hands, probably, maybe, I would definitely say better than Ben, but not a
I mean, I think Nick has
a better jab than Ben. It still wasn't necessarily impressive.
I didn't know that Askren's stand-up was that bad because I never really seen it.
Well, you never had to see it, and that's the problem.
Yeah, that's
he's so dominant.
Against Damian Maia, it was
everybody played into his game. It was like a fear-type deal where everybody was closing the distance, trying to strike, and they were getting taken down.
That fight against Damian Maia, I think that's really what exposed Ben Askren
because like I talked about earlier,
right there, that fight.
Just like I talked about earlier, Damian Maia's boxing, not necessarily impressive, but it's enough.
Damian Maia has knockouts and in his kickboxing he worked on it for a little bit.
For sure, yeah.
Somebody told him he needed to kickbox, and there was a time he took a couple losses doing it, and he got a couple of knockouts doing it. And then he went back to just being Damian Maia, and then he went on a title run almost.
Yeah.
What I really think this shows us, because if Ben Askren didn't exist, let's act like we hadn't seen him before. If you look at Damian Maia's stand-up, you're like, wow, his stand-up is just not very good. But then Ben Askren comes along, and then you see what not good stand-up is. You know what I mean?
Well, it really gives you like the spectrum of how good and bad things can be.
That matter.
He's got the
Gracie stand up.
He's got the Bangkok Ready syndrome, I think is what he has, where he thought he should have won the decision against Cub Swanson, which I think is preposterous.
I agree. Yeah.
But
if there was 2 more rounds, what happens in that fight?
I think Ben Askren, he was never ready for the plan B, and like I said, I think the Damian Maia fight exposed him more than anything, because the Jorge Masvidal fight, that was a very bad reaction to the thing that Masvidal was doing. Oh, he's running towards me.
But you knew that Masvidal watched enough video to know that that's what he was going to do.
It's exactly the awkward, weird entry that he does to every single takedown.
But the fact that he would shoot when a guy is charging him like that, I just thought, like, obviously it's on instinct because you don't expect a guy to be running at you like a bull. But
if a guy's charging you and you've got a good blast double, that's the best.
That's what you're going to do. Yeah.
So you can chalk some of that up to, like, oh, it's just one fluke movement, but that's the fight game. But like I said, I think it's
not a fluke, in my opinion, if it's a pattern.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And Masvidal was practicing it.
But, exactly. And he
Masvidal's flying knee and Conor's KO of Aldo. They are
they're calculated
and impressive, but they're calculated and planned and practiced.
Right, they're calculated based off the pattern. They're calculated based off the pattern of the fighter that they're fighting.
And all of that stuff that we just said is why Masvidal's flying knee KO is so impressive.
Right.
Yeah, I really think we're going to be talking about that for the rest of our lives because of how high level Ben Askren was and how highly touted he was, and that's definitely why it is my 2019 knockout of the year.
Do you mind if I shout out some like honorable mentions?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Because nothing.
I got my tight runner up.
Yeah, you got.
I got my boy Kevin Lee going against Gregor Gillespie.
Phenomenal.
Big
knockout.
fan of both guys, right? Both really great grapplers. We are now seeing Kevin Lee. I believe this is Kevin Lee's first fight coming out of TriStar, right?
Yes.
This is the evolution of Kevin Lee here.
Kevin Lee's first fight out of TriStar, and I'd argue that is one of the most impressive fights, at least stand-up wise, that he's had for the length of that fight. You know what I mean? But it definitely showed maybe holes in Gregor's game. He's a ridiculously good wrestler. So is Kevin Lee. And a lot of times, just like we'll get to it at some point, I'm sure, the Usman Covington fight, they're both so damn good at grappling that it turns into a K1 kickboxing match.
Right.
But I didn't think that Kevin Lee could kick high like that.
Exactly, because you don't see that from him necessarily. That's not a common combination that comes out of him. That's Firas Zahabi, right? And that is textbook Firas Zahabi. And he executed it so perfectly. And the reason I would say I'd give it a runner-up position is just because of how brutal it looked.
Yeah.
Him hitting that
the way
head
he
kick
fell against the fence.
and just collapsing Gregor. Yeah, that's to me what the shock value was.
So what are your honorable mentions, Brad?
My little honorable mentions, I've got Rosenstruck busting up the ream. That
Right
was
at the
a
end.
great fight, and there was about 10, 15 seconds left maybe, and he lands a right straight on Overeem's lip that busts it up. Like you thought Robbie Lawler's lip was gross after the Rory fight. This is the worst busted lip I've ever seen, and it is from one punch.
Heavyweight power, baby.
That is from one punch. And Rosenstruck just deserves a shout out on KOs just because that's what he does. He punched that one guy twice. Once with like just a check left hook, and then once on the ground, and it was done. I don't even remember the guy's name. He killed him so quick.
Didn't he knock out Arlovsky?
I mean, he's murking everyone. That's the point. That's why I brought up Rosenstruck. And then also, it deserves to be said, Douglas Lima's spectacular KO of Michael Venom Page.
Bellator shout out.
Just a couple of Bellator shout outs on this.
Definitely.
We don't do too much Bellator, but that's got to be said. That was a beautiful, beautiful textbook technique. The way you handle that weird, awkward, explosive style of MVP. He hit him with the leg kick, knocked him off balance, and then just a perfect uppercut to the jaw that deadened him. Just completely deadened him.
Right, because that was an MVP who was I don't know if I'd say picking apart Lima, but he was definitely starting to land a lot.
He was landing.
He was landing
For
a
sure
lot.
Was landing.
And you know, with MVP, the more he lands, the more crazy he gets, and I mean that in the best way possible, right?
The more he
starts getting real whimsical on you.
Whimsical's a good word for it.
He gets real ridiculous with the stuff he throws, but that's why we love him so much. You know what I mean? And he built his confidence is through the roof coming into a fight. He's already got tremendous confidence. Then on top of that tremendous confidence, every time he hits you, you can see the smile getting bigger on his face because he knows he has your number. He's so good at fighting a fight and calculating things as the fight goes on. And I feel like he was he really thought, and I could see his confidence building. He knew he had Lima, and Lima came back. I guess that was the third round, maybe.
Yeah, and that
came back in that third round, and he stayed calm. He stayed calculated. He showed that he's a veteran, and he showed why he's at the top of that division.
And also, just shout out to Lima, also probably being one of the best 170ers in the world.
Definitely one of the most entertaining, if anything.
Lima's great.
When it comes to me ranking my knockout submissions, obviously the strength of opponent is a huge deal to me, and that's why that is so high on the list, because I do think Michael Venom Page is one of the best welterweights in the world.
Oh, he's a high-level
I
welterweight,
think
too.
They need to stop messing around and stop feeding him cans to fight, because it's just wasting time in his career when he should be fighting top contenders. I think he could beat a lot of top contenders.
Well, they'll give him a prospect, right? And then they'll give him some dude.
Yeah.
And then they'll give him Douglas Lima. And then they'll give him some dude. And
they'll give him four dudes in a row, because I think they're so content on having him as a highlight reel.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
they're so focused on that.
Their cards. He puts on a show for them.
That doesn't help him, in my opinion, in any fashion, though, because if you keep beating
what he's
guys
trying to do, he's getting paid, he's making money, he's not getting hurt.
But as a fighter, I think that all that's doing is hurting him. And I feel like him losing to Lima might be one of the best things that could have happened to him, because it's a wake-up call, you know what I mean? And not to say that, obviously he wasn't losing that whole fight. That was a hell of a fight.
It was a great fight.
But it shows that, the ridiculous, entertaining stuff can still be there, but you have to tighten up a little bit, and you still have to fight a smart fight.
Right.
Yes, it's okay to get whimsical, play, get in the guy's head.
But at the end of the day, it's a fight.
At the end of the day, it's a fight.
Yeah. And look at how Conor evolved. Everybody thought Conor was this karate master throwing crazy kicks and spinning kicks and stuff. And I was telling him the whole time, Conor's a boxer. Watch.
Yep. He just lands
those
left
kicks,
hand.
Yeah.
Those kicks
a Celtic
are
cross.
Show. Those kicks are misdirection and smoke and mirrors, and oh my god, if they hit,
how often did he throw those against top level opponents after he beat Dennis Seaver? When did you really see him throw
Joe
crazy
Lozon
shit?
made a fantastic point, because I think this was in his analysis of the first Nate Diaz Conor McGregor fight. He picked Nate Diaz to win that fight, and what he said was, I think literally everything that Conor does is to disguise his left hand, from his kicks, from his random attacks, the way he waves his hands, to his movement coach, to his taunting and everything else. He wants everybody to forget about the left hand. And I think that's a wonderful analysis, because
it's brilliant.
It's won him everything he's got.
Yep.
So we're going to move on to our submission picks for 2019. Mine is somebody who actually just got it earlier this month, one of my favorite prospects in the UFC. He accidentally put a drill in his nutsack, but that is a different note for a different day.
Talking about
that might be submission of the year.
I'm talking about Thug Nasty. Thug, it's nasty that he put a drill in it. Thug Nasty Bryce Mitchell, he got a twister submission over Matt Sales. It is the second twister in UFC history.
Yep.
Obviously, we remember the first one.
And the second twister that Bryce Mitchell's dealt with.
This year.
And that's how you do that joke, Nicholas.
At least he won.
It was right in front of me. I didn't do it, but he got a twister submission. Obviously, we remember the first one that Korean Zombie got against Leonard Garcia years ago.
That made me a Korean Zombie fan.
Yeah. So
that fight too, though. Oh.
I feel like, honestly, I've seen twisters pulled off in different, obviously, jiu-jitsu tournaments and with a few MMA fights. I think it's easier to hit than it might come off, because it looks very complex.
There's two reasons that the twister is easier to hit than you think. One, every wrestler knows it. Because it's a guillotine.
Right, it's the wrestler's guillotine.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it, but they don't really know it. You know what I mean?
It's a different position for wrestlers than it is in jiu-jitsu. But that's why it's so comfortable for people to get to. Second, it's easier to get on the back because if you know it, you can get it, and the setup and defense of a rear naked choke will let you get yourself under that arm to set up the twister where you need to be. Pass it from the baseball bat grip all the way around and get the head. So you can use the rear naked choke defense to set up your twister. Also, people don't know the twister that well.
I agree, yeah.
Everybody on the back goes for rear naked chokes.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Right, and when you throw in the truck position and you start digging for that arm across the body, if you don't know what you're looking for, if you're not getting hit with that in practice regularly, you're not going to be too concerned, because you're like, well, my neck's fine, so I'm okay. And
it's like, he's not even all the way on my back.
Why,
he doesn't have two hooks.
That's why maybe I'd say it's the submission itself isn't easy to pull off, because you have to get the guy's back and get yourself in that position with the truck and actually fight for that arm across the body. But it's easy with the surprise factor, right? Because nobody does that, and I feel like no knock on this guy, but maybe he just you can be legit at jiu-jitsu and just not do that. That could just be a thing that it just doesn't happen to you.
Yeah, Eddie Bravo talks about the twister all the time, and the way you see the Bryce Mitchell setup is just your standard twister setup that you do when someone doesn't know exactly what they're doing with the twister, and then you can take advantage of them if you have a good twister.
Well, it almost looked like the guy had no concern on his face, right? He wasn't concerned about being in that position until he was hurting. You're not concerned until you're in pain.
Doesn't feel like anything until you start.
Until that arm gets, until you hit the point of no return. That's the thing with the twister, right?
It's like leg locks, right?
Yeah, you hit that point of no return, and you either tap or you're hurt.
Yeah.
There's no escaping it really, unless you're fighting it while they're still going for your arm. You're able to get the truck position off or things like that.
I'm really interested to see what happens with Bryce Mitchell coming to 2020 because I think he is phenomenally talented. I think,
especially training at such a small gym, it's really the biggest guys out of his gym.
Arkansas, baby,
and the
camo
only guys,
shorts.
Oh yeah,
I want my camo shorts.
The only guys that are notable, I guess you could say, at least in the UFC right now, you have Violent Bob Ross and Bryce Mitchell. Out of some little town in Arkansas, right? Out of a smaller gym. It's not small, but it's a smaller gym. A lot of just normal dudes. But Bryce is very good, man. He has dedicated boxing coaches. He has dedicated just overall stand up. His jiu-jitsu is phenomenal. Yeah. He actually runs his own jiu-jitsu classes at his gym on top of taking jiu-jitsu classes. But
I think that's what makes me like him so much.
All while still being in college.
Is he in college?
Yeah.
Really? I didn't know that. But I think, obviously, as jiu-jitsu guys, I think we can relate to see a guy make jiu-jitsu so exciting in the UFC. Yeah. He makes it very aesthetically pleasing to watch.
Because it gets very annoying hearing the, stand him up, bro. You know, all that talk.
Yeah. And you see, this is why we don't stand him up, because this can happen.
Right.
And
you get the casual fans, stand him up, man.
Man.
And they freak out when they see this.
He's finishing people. And he makes exciting ground fights. That's why I like him a lot.
Country strong, baby.
Country strong.
It seems like that's our consensus sub of the year.
Is that what you have, Brock?
Yeah, it's extremely exciting. Yeah. And I thought it was the most impressive that I've seen this year. Especially the way he locked in the full rear naked choke grip.
Oh, yeah.
Like he was about to rip that dude's whole head off.
It hurts. I'm sure both of you have been in a twister as well. I've been in a couple, and it doesn't feel good.
Never a one like that. Yeah. But, God.
I mean, half one time.
I mean, geez.
So, since we all agree on the submission of the year, we'll move on to.
I have a few honorable mentions.
Yeah, go for it.
Got to shout out Misha Serkinov and the Peruvian necktie.
For sure.
That was great to see. Charles Dubronx Oliveira smashing and then subbing with that anaconda choke.
Yeah, anaconda choke is one of my favorite submissions, honestly, because it's one of the first that I saw when I first started watching UFC religiously. Phil Davis, he was one of my first.
Oh yeah,
when he used to hit that all the time. And yeah, the first card I watched live, it was a card that Anderson Silva fought Stephan Bonner. Phil Davis fought on that card against a Brazilian guy named Wagner Prado, and I knew that move was coming, and I think that guy knew it was coming too. But he snapped
Good luck
him down,
stopping it.
Locked it up, and Gator roll. I love that move, man. It's an awesome move.
And then just a quick Bellator shout out to the Brent Primus Goga Plata.
Great move.
And AJ McKee's falling off the back armbar triangle, failed triangle armbar. Both great submissions there. For a lot of the same reasons that we were talking about Page's armbar earlier, AJ McKee's armbar is very similar.
Yeah.
Falling off, failing triangle, and getting the armbar. Now, if you wanted to go ahead, Nick.
We are going to move on to the 2019 Fight of the Year. There are definitely a lot of close candidates, and I think there are 3 front runners for this that I wouldn't argue against. I've been thinking about this for a while.
Do you want to shout out the 3 first?
So yeah, the 2 that I didn't pick that were phenomenal candidates actually happened on the same card. The co-main event of this card was an interim lightweight title fight between Dustin Poirier and Max Holloway. It was a rematch of
the main event.
No, I think that was the co-main to. Actually, yeah, you are right.
You're right. Gastelum was the co-main.
You're right.
To
yes.
Holloway Poirier 2.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, that was the main event of this card. Dustin Poirier fighting for the interim lightweight championship against the reigning and defending featherweight champion of the world, Max Holloway. It was a rematch of a fight they had early in their careers.
2012, 2013.
Yeah, I think that was Max Holloway's
It was
UFC
Max
debut.
Holloway's last loss. No, Conor was his.
Conor
last
was
loss.
his last loss. Yeah.
That was, that was his UFC debut.
Yeah, so
He was like 20.
obviously,
like 18.
completely different fighters. Both of them evolved immensely since that first fight, and everybody knew that fight meant absolutely nothing going into the second fight. But me and Brock were fortunate enough to meet Dustin Poirier earlier this month, and Brad might be a little salty about that.
Nick has recently moved into an apartment directly on Dustin Poirier's nutsack.
Well, we were talking to Dustin Poirier about this fight, and
Rented a U-Haul.
what made this fight really special to watch was both of these guys struggling through a lot of basically breaking mental thresholds in this fight. Dustin Poirier took the approach of throwing power the entire fight. Usually when you hear the expression, when you try to win by knockout, you're not going to win a decision.
Yeah.
Dustin Poirier did not listen to that because Max Holloway was throwing light volume, and Dustin Poirier was throwing heat the entire fight, and he never stopped. You could see that he was tired, but he just would not stop. He was very mentally strong, and he was able to pull out a 48-47 decision against Max Holloway. So was it on the same card that Israel Adesanya fought?
Kelvin Gastelum.
Was that on the same card?
Co-main event.
Yeah, okay.
Yes,
So that was the co-main of that card was Israel Adesanya versus Kelvin Gastelum for the interim middleweight championship of the world. I think a lot of the MMA fan base would probably pick this fight as the fight of the year. It was a phenomenal fight. I think most people were selling Kelvin Gastelum short, no pun intended. And I think he proved a lot. I think he proved a lot of people wrong in that fight, and he proved that he belongs at the top of the division and gave Israel Adesanya a run for his money. But I think Israel Adesanya proved that he was championship material, and obviously he proved that later in the year. And they both brought out the best in each other, and we got to see the best of both skill sets. We got to see the toughness. Might have taken a couple years off of both of their lives, but
I've been on Kelvin Gastelum since he was on The Ultimate Fighter,
Yes.
and he was picked last and ran through everybody, and then a great fight with Uriah Hall to win The Ultimate Fighter.
my personal favorite season of The Ultimate
It
Fighter.
was the last good season of The Ultimate Fighter.
So, with those two fights, I loved both those fights, but my personal 2019 fight of the year was a fight that just happened for the welterweight championship of the world. Kamaru Usman knocking out Colby Covington late in the fight in the 5th round.
I think it was a minute left, minute 30
Not
left.
even. I think there was like 30 seconds left.
Very late in the fight.
So one of my that was probably the greatest title fight in the history of the welterweight division. The only thing
It's up there with like GSP and Hendricks and Hendricks and Lawler.
I think that was what made that fight so special to me. Was a lot there was low expectations for a lot of people in that fight because both of these guys have a grindy, wrestly style, and they thought they were gonna engage in this weird wrestling fight. But what we saw was two guys that were great at wrestling. They went to the striking, and it ended up being a phenomenal fight, back and forth. And both guys, just like the previous fights, they brought out the best in each other. And another really soft spot for me when it comes to fights that make the fight of the year, fight of the night candidate is when it ends in a finish, because we have a definitive outcome in the fight.
And actually very similar to the Dustin Max fight, because both guys can throw volume, but Usman threw volume with power.
With power the whole time.
The way Dustin threw volume with power the whole time.
It was very impressive.
It's like Usman, they both have phenomenal gas tanks, but Usman was investing in that knockout.
And the body shots,
And
too,
the body
man.
shots.
He's ripping the body.
Body shots, and obviously you saw the shot that broke Kobe's jaw, but
Early in the fight.
those body shots were absolute money, and you saw it was wearing on Colby whether he wanted to admit it or not. But yeah, that was undoubtedly my fight of the year. Brock, what did you think?
I really liked the Izzy Adesanya Kelvin Gastelum fight. Personally, I think I would have to say that's my favorite fight of the year, just because it was so exciting to me. The back and forth they had, he's getting knocked down, he's hurt. Like the whole fight, the whole time, they were pressuring each other. There were a little bit of grappling exchanges. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. I couldn't get enough of it. I could watch that fight 100 times a day and not get tired of it. It's so impressive to watch both of those guys at such a high level. I would have to probably that's definitely got to be my favorite. Just the entertainment factor for me, I feel like was probably the highest out of anything I've seen this year.
I would have to agree. I would take Izzy and Gastelum as my fight of the year. Just to me, that is the highest expression of mixed martial arts skill that we've seen this year. Seeing the way that Stylebender comes in and strikes and feints and moves differently than everyone else, and the way Kelvin can throw straight punches and is so defensive while still coming at you and brawling, and being able to see Kelvin try and use his wrestling, but we saw some triangle attempts and some good submission attempts from Adesanya.
That's what impressed me. I don't think a lot of people are noticing. It was that, Izzy never really stopped working, even on his back. When you think most people would take a break, he locked in that triangle.
You know who that reminded me of? The way he just started fighting directly from his back. Tony Ferguson.
Yeah.
Not as destructive as with elbows and control positions, but the way he just, all right, we're here now. I'm still fighting. I'm going to attack until I can get up. And I really liked that we saw from Izzy.
We never really saw like a down part of that fight, and it was definitely a
nobody got
fight.
A break.
I mean,
I do have a couple of honorable mentions for this category as well. We shouted out the three main. You can't go wrong with Holloway, Poirier 2, or Usman and Covington, or Adesanya or Gastelum. You can't argue. All three of those could be fight of the year for me. I wouldn't argue against them. Two that I had that just stood out to me as like great fights. When we finally got it, Yair versus Jeremy Stevens.
Oh yeah,
was a great fight. They hated each other and just went to war until Yair got that one. And then also Vicente Luque and Brian Barberena. Do you remember?
I absolutely
these two barbarians just clubbing the fuck out of each other.
I kind of forgot about that. I was at your house, I think, Nick.
Yes, and it's like I said earlier with the Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington fight. It's just it adds extra layer of sexiness when there's a knockout at the end of a war like that.
Yes,
it just makes a classic, and a lot of people were pulling for Barberena at that point. He was almost like he's become like a people's champion in a way because he's built on toughness, and he's got a marketable nickname and the mohawk and everything.
Breaks off a Sage.
Yeah, and a lot of people were like disappointed that he got knocked out at the end, but I just that was such an awesome fight, man. It was an amazing fight.
That was a great fight.
I want to give a quick shout out to Donald Cerrone. Very beginning of the year, with the TKO of Alex Hernandez. I'm not gonna call it fight of the year or even a runner up.
Just your moment of the year.
That might be my moment of the year because he's telling him like, "Oh, you're an old man. I'm gonna beat you down. You got nothing left in this fight game."
Geriatric shit.
Right, and he hit him with the meanest right high kick I've seen in a while, besides Kevin Lee's. Well, that was a left high kick, but he hit him with a mean high kick. Hurt him, wobbled him, and finished the fight in very impressive fashion. I mean, he tore Alex Hernandez apart. And props to Alex for, he took it like a man for the most part, I feel like. And all that shit
took
talking.
It better than Colby did.
All that shit talking that they did. All the lead up to the fight. Donald didn't really necessarily say a whole lot. He was just kind of like, I'll show you. I'll show you.
Okay, kid.
Yeah, he's like, all right, young
cute.
man.
It's one of the, like when Conor talked shit to Cowboy a couple years ago when Conor was about to fight Jose, and I think Cowboy would admit like Conor does get to him a little bit.
Got under his skin for sure.
He said it.
Cowboy with Alex Hernandez, he's probably like, who the fuck is this guy?
Exactly.
Like, who are you? Have you even earned
Hasn't
a name
necessarily
for yourself?
proved
Same thing
himself.
happened with Cowboy and Darren Till, just the other way around though. Cowboy's like, I don't even know who that guy is. I'm gonna go kick his head off.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't go your way.
And I feel like we talked about the magic earlier when it comes to momentum, and you have that mental strength of building on wins, and you feel like you're one of the best in the world. I think Cowboy took the magic away from him big time because I think he's won a fight since then, but he did not look the same as he had Alex Hernandez. I'm talking about.
Yeah.
He hasn't looked the same.
No, Cowboy kind of took that confidence, I haven't lost yet confidence that you can get back, but you can't get it all back.
So we move on to probably my favorite discussion of this because there are a couple good candidates. We're going on to the 2019 Male Fighter of the Year. I think just like with the fight, there's a front runner that most people are picking.
I've got a couple of front runners, and maybe let me lay them out for you, and you can tell me how you feel about them. Mm-hmm. We've got from working from the bottom of my list up, Alexander Volkanovski, who went from contender to champ in the span of a year, which is great to see it always. You've got Kamaru Usman, who captured and defended his welterweight title. Mm-hmm. You've got Henry Cejudo, who, was gifted a title at 125, but then defended it and got the title at 135, fair and square at least. And then you have Jorge Masvidal, who's just been on a smashing spree, and Stylebender, of course, who captured an interim belt and a legit belt. So,
I think the top two out of those that you mentioned are the Stylebender Israel Adesanya and Jorge Gamebred Masvidal. I think most people would take Israel Adesanya on strength of competition. I absolutely I wouldn't disagree with that because I think he's probably the better fighter out of the two, especially when you weigh them on pound for pound rankings. Masvidal is not even a champion, but my personal
he's the baddest motherfucker.
He's got I'm sorry, I apologize. Motherfucker belt.
He's the BMF champ.
That's the BMF champion, sir.
After stopped on a doctor stoppage, has such a BMF belt right there.
Yeah, dude. But he ripped his eyelid off. What do you
broke
mean?
A dude's face wide the fuck
he
open.
Literally ripped his face off with his knuckles. But anyway,
his face didn't fall apart by accident.
But anyway,
Masvidal did that to him.
It might have. I've seen Diaz sneeze hard and his eyelashes.
I mean,
that's my point. But
I've seen his eyebrow fall off if he sneezes hard enough.
But anyway, Jorge Masvidal is my pick for fight of the year, and I'll tell you why. I think my criteria going into this was seeing a guy. Seeing his level rise.
Like evolution.
I think Israel Adesanya was here and he went here. I think Masvidal started here as far as his stock and went all the way up here.
And not because he's bad, just because of a popularity thing and people not necessarily respecting him.
I think he wasn't rising to the occasion in 2018 and before that. Always knew he was a good fighter.
Right.
But it just aggravated me to see
him. He used to lose split decisions all the time. Mm-hmm.
Damian Maia, Benson Henderson, Elia Quinta, and it just on and on. He lost
twice.
These close
fights that on paper he probably should have won.
Yeah,
the Elia Quinta fight twice really rubbed him the wrong way. And after that, he went to South America, was on some weird reality show that he did not enjoy, but he realized what am I doing? I'm just gonna go knock these motherfuckers out. I'm fighting and trying to fighting to not lose. And then he's losing split decisions.
Yeah, that's basically how it went.
And then
there was a mentality change, according to him. He looks a mentality change.
A whole lot better at 170 than he did at 55 as well.
Yes,
definitely.
Way fuller, stronger.
Mm-hmm. I think his cardio might even be better.
He really showed that he instead of him worrying about what they have to offer him. He's like, what do I have to offer them?
Right.
Yes.
Where they should be scared of me.
Yes.
And he really rose to the occasion against Darren Till. I knew. I wouldn't say I knew, but I really felt that he was going to knock out Darren Till just because I knew what he was capable of, and seeing Darren Till come off that very disappointing title loss, and I knew he had that in him, and to take that and just build on it the rest of the year, and his stock from before that Darren Till fight to now, really
it's through the roof. Yeah, it's insane.
So that is why I picked him as fighter of the year, because he goes off of that, and people doubted him in that Ben Askren fight, and you saw what happened there. And then
it does not hurt that he got the most famous knockout you'll probably ever see.
The most viral moment of the year, the fastest knockout, and then the best moment of the year.
Biggest fight against Diaz.
And then the biggest fight of the year.
That's the thing. It's crazy. Like, if you compare his stock in February, and then everybody's talking about him before he fights Nate Diaz. They're the talk of the town. The Rock is going to present their title.
Right.
And it's just absolutely insane how quick.
You got 1,000 or 2,000 people showing up to a press conference on the beach. You know what I mean? For what?
It was just huge. So I can't argue against Masvidal, but I would have to go Stylebender because he conquered a division. Yep. He conquered to the highest level his division, and he did it without stuttering, without a misstep. He
looked perfect.
He looked great, and equally outside of the ring, while rising his stock in the ring with impressive wins and knockouts and decision victories. He can talk outside of the ring. He's in John Jones's head. John Jones,
yes, he is
big time
desperate for someone to fight. For a lot of the reasons you said, Masvidal, who got his huge moments this year. Stylebender had his huge moments too, and it's hard to counter between these two.
If you're ranking it purely off of, like, who had more accomplishment as far as
well, you'd have to say Izzy because
Izzy because it's
right?
a real
100%.
accomplishment,
right?
Not to take
real
that
belt,
much away from the BMF belt, but it's not a real belt, I guess.
It was
they
it was a spectacle.
Yeah,
it was a spectacle.
They had a spectacle in a moment, and they made a fuck.
It was a
money
fight, yeah.
And they could have started a 165-pound division, which they still need to do.
Oops, they didn't. And oops, they did.
But the UFC, while being run by Dana White, will never do anything to make the sport actually better.
Yeah. So, Brock, you've heard both of ours. What is your 2019 Fighter of the Year?
I would say Izzy for the accolades that he was able to achieve, all the achievements he was able to make, all the opportunities he made for himself, selling out that huge arena, the big Marvel Stadium, making one of the biggest fights of the year. I mean, that Kelvin fight did him very well. It did both guys very well. On paper, Kelvin lost, but both of their stocks went through the roof after that fight. They're both now people. I'm not going to call him a household name. I'm not going to call Kelvin a household name like Izzy might be now, but he definitely got a lot of popularity off that fight. And I feel like even to a more casual fan, both of those guys gained a lot of respect.
For sure.
So if you see Kelvin Gastelum's name on a fight card and you don't necessarily know a whole lot about the UFC, you might say, well, I remember that guy fighting. He's a fucking savage. I want to see more of him.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. So with Izzy, that was for the interim title, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you had him fight for the title after that. Looked impressive against Robert Whittaker.
He made it look easier than the Kelvin Gastelum fight.
Exactly.
Amazing.
And now maybe that was what you could. A lot of people are going to argue, oh, well, Whittaker had ring rust, this, that, and the other. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. He still beat him.
Yeah. You show up on the day that you sign a paper to show up on, and you defend your belt, and you win it or you don't.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So,
just to wrap up real quick, do we want to talk about a couple of the best cards of the year?
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
I think obviously we were covering this with some of our best fighters and best fights of the year. UFC 236. That
Holloway versus Poirier.
Holloway versus Poirier. Israel Adesanya versus Kelvin Gastelum. Before that, we saw what I call the redneck ass whooping of Eric Anders with Khalil Roundtree.
Khalil Roundtree Yodong is amazing.
As far as
ever since he went to Thailand and started just training Muay Thai, granted his ground game is god awful, but
As far as we all three of us, I'm sure, have been mixed martial arts fans for a long time. There are fights like that just rekindle your love for certain parts of the fight game.
I mean, it was a good old-fashioned ass whooping.
And
That's what it was.
Muay Thai ass whooping.
I remember seeing Eric Anders' first fight in the UFC, and they're like, he was a middle linebacker on the 2008 Alabama
Hey, Nick, did you know that
Crimson Tide National Championship team. And, oh my God, that fight looked like what I thought fighting a middle linebacker from Alabama would be like. He beat the shit out of that dude.
Me and Brock had that running joke for a while. You couldn't go 2 minutes without hearing that he was an Alabama linebacker.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Turns out fighting a linebacker from Alabama goes just about as well as you think it would go. Whew, Eric Anders can fight.
Tough son of a bitch, man.
Also on that card, we saw Nikita Krylov get revenge against Ovince St. Preux. Mm-hmm. And remember, Ovince St. Preux got the Von Flue choke on him years ago. That was the very first one of a streak that he went on. Von Preux chokes, we'll call him now.
Right. If you hit Von Flues that often and that damn good, I think it gets renamed,
Yeah, I think he deserves that much.
The Masvidal Diaz card was a great card also.
Yes,
the
absolutely.
Usman Covington card we just saw was a great one.
And one you were pointing out earlier was the Fight Night
152.
152 that featured Rafael dos Anjos versus Kevin Lee as the main event, and had Ian Heinich versus Antonio Carlos Jr. That was
Shoeface.
It was what I talk about.
Good ass fight, man.
Yeah, it was what I talk about. Where sometimes
fight.
Fights are decided by a battle of fruition, I call it, where whoever can push harder. because
yeah, definitely.
I think my example is like Henry Cejudo. I don't think he was a better fighter than Marlon Moraes, but he could push harder than him, and that's how he won.
He put a lot of fights. You put a pace on a guy that they can't handle, and you see what happens.
And then you also have to talk about UFC 239, Jones Santos.
Yes.
Yep.
Amanda Nunes knocks out Holly Holm. Jorge
With the head
Masvidal got the Askren knockout.
Don't need to say anymore.
Jan Blachowicz
Knockout Luke Rockhold.
destroyed Luke Rockhold's career.
I feel bad for his chin.
Chiesa Sanchez.
I'm very happy for Luke Rockhold though. I just saw him in a Polo Cologne commercial the other day. I'm very happy for him.
He's been doing a little modeling here.
Handsome bastard. He got it going outside of the octagon.
I guess he's getting into some grappling too, right? He just went against Nicky Rodriguez.
Can't say that dude's on.
Go well.
That dude ain't exactly clean. But
what are you trying to say? He hasn't taken a shower?
I'm saying his traps.
What are you implying? What are you implying?
He
Does
looks,
he have a six-pack on his back?
I thought it was Jorgen Von Strangle from Fairly Odd Parents.
Just like Gordon Ryan and a lot of people that John Donaher teaches, steroids are a large part of their diet.
I'm gonna go on record and say that I don't think that they're on steroids.
And I'm going on record that Brock just lied to you all.
They're not on that many steroids.
He's on camera. You can see it all.
They're not on that many steroids. Just a touch.
We're getting off topic. We wanted to touch on the cards of the year, and a lot of our fights and KOs and everything really came from these group of cards. Now, my question is, would you rather have 2, 3? We have 5 here, 4 of which are pay-per-views, which is a pretty good number of like strong pay-per-views a year. Would you rather have your 4 big pay-per-views a year, or would you rather see that those 4 pay-per-views that arguably the top 3 fights could headline a pay-per-view on all of them spread out to 12 pay-per-views? Or are you okay with 2 or every other one being the top fights, and then,
See, I'm not a guy that necessarily needs a title fight to want to watch or have interest in it.
That's where I think the UFC loses touch, where I think they could sell pay-per-views without a title fight.
I mean, how well do you think Conor and Cowboy is going to sell?
They need to continue to do that.
That's for no type of belt,
yeah.
Conor and Cowboy. And I guarantee that when they start pushing this fight in the next 2 weeks, maybe, it's going to sell huge.
I mean, it already sold out.
Yeah.
Well, right, but I'm saying pay-per-view wise, it's going to be huge. Millions, it's going to be a huge pay-per-view. Oh, yeah. And there's no belt involved. You don't need it. All I care about are entertaining fights. Do I think it's going to be an entertaining fight? I'll buy it. I'll watch. Yeah. But I understand the business aspect where a more casual fan, a guy who doesn't know that person, oh, well, if he's the champ, this is going to be a good card. Mm-hmm. This is something I need to watch, right?
Right.
But I guess because I'm into it so much, I know a decent amount of fighters. I'm okay with not every card being the biggest thing. Or
I definitely like
fight.
what they do every once in a while, where they stack 2 or 3 title fights.
Yeah, I'm not mad about it for sure. I actually prefer that. I think
I actually think I prefer. This is why I brought it up. Prefer having every 3 months you have your big cornerstone card. Bellator straight out said they do it. UFC's kind of does it anyway, and they just don't call them like tent poles the way Bellator does. But when you have your big card that you've got to look forward to, that you can create an event around, a moment in time where you can have the entire zeitgeist of public opinion and the public eye on one event, like a Conor fight or the BMF title or a John Jones fight a lot of the times. Stuff like that. I really like when a card can bring in a huge audience.
I mean, John Jones at this point could fight anybody, and everyone's gonna watch because he's John Jones. Nobody really cares who he's fighting.
Or a Khabib fight for that.
Nobody's watching the John Jones fight because they want to see Dominic Reyes fight. They want to see John Jones fight.
Yeah.
Like, I hate to be like that. I like the guy, but nobody's watching it for Dominic Reyes.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what we see with boxing every once in a while. Is that it's not about the opponent. It's about who is fighting. Like, who's Canelo fighting? Who cares?
Right. Exactly. I'm just gonna watch.
But I think that will bring us to about the end here.
And before we wrap this up, I really wanted to. This is kind of impromptu, but as far as looking forward to 2020, when it comes to the prospects that we've seen, maybe build a little name for themselves. Who should we look out for in 2020? I have a couple names. Obviously, the 2 that I shouted out earlier, Aspen Ladd, she's a contender at this point. She's not a prospect, but I do think she's going to build upon her momentum.
Caitlin Chukagian.
Caitlin Chukagian is definitely probably my number one.
Especially in a division like that.
And Tatiana Suarez.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. As far as my prospects, I really think Jeff Neal is going to make a big name for himself.
Jeff Neal is who I was going to say. Yeah. He had that great knockout over Mike Perry.
Yeah.
Yep.
And obviously, I called out Bryce Mitchell. There's a million good things I could say about him. And
I got another one for you.
What's that?
Leon Edwards.
That is very good. I think that Woodley fight just got confirmed.
I think it's happening. Yeah, it's happening in like April or something like that.
Yeah, I hear rumors and things about it, but I'm not 100% sure if it's going to happen yet.
Yeah.
I would not be mad about seeing that though. I think it's a really good fight.
Now, Tyron Woodley is a problem, but if Leon Edwards can make it happen, and I think he might be able to, and we might actually get the Masvidal fight.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of good things.
There's some things that can happen with Leon Edwards this year.
I think there's a lot of good things to look forward to into 2020. I think it's going to be a great year for title fights. And
El Kukui's coming for you.
I can't. Oh, yeah.
El Kukui is coming.
Tony Ferguson and Habib, I cannot. I'm praying to the MMA gods that this goes through. And I'm not going to believe it until they both step in the cage.
Absolutely.
Because we know how Tony is. My man might trip over a cable walking into the octagon.
It's going to feel like...
And Khabib might eat some cake.
It wasn't like 5 months away. It's going to feel like 13 months.
It's going to feel like an eternity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But all the divisions, man, flyweight might be exciting soon with Benavidez.
Oh, the Benavidez fight he's got coming up as well. I'd love to see that. I can't wait till Aljo beats the shit out of Cejudo. That's going to be great. But yeah, until the next fight card, guys.
We'll see you for McGregor versus Cowboy.
Yeah,
Definitely.
We'll be back for McGregor versus Cowboy. Like, share, and subscribe to the video and the channel and everything. And until next time, we'll see you on the mats. Stop recording now, Max.
I have been holding that in for like 25 minutes.
Oh my